Chicken Philosophy, Teilhard de Chardin, Part 21. Sorry, I got distracted because there's one of those butterflies, those like black butterflies with the white. Anyway, it's outside the window, and the window's foggy, so it's like really... Okay, it's gone. Hi, I'm Edward. I'm your host for today. I'll be picking up where I think it was Gwydion last time left off in our reading of the Divine Milieu. We're getting toward the end of the Divine Milieu, but not to worry. I have plenty of other Teilhard de Chardin books, so when we finish this, we'll just move on to probably Writings in Time of War. I think... Anyway, if this is your first time, or if you would like to see if there's another, of these Teilhard de Chardin recitals that you would rather watch, or if you would like to start with the first one, you can click right there. See, I pointed with the incense. That's enough dilly-dally. I will get to the reading, and, at the moment I have no idea where... Oh, there it is. I'll try it without it first. We'll see how it goes. When the priest says the words, Hoc est corpus meum, his words fall directly onto the bread and directly transform it into the individual reality of Christ. But the great sacramental operation does not cease at that local and momentary event. Even children are taught that throughout the life of each man and the life of the church and the history of the world, there is only one Mass and one communion. Christ died once in agony. Trigger warning. Peter and Paul received communion on such and such a day at a particular hour, but these different acts are only the diversely central points in which the continuity of a unique act is split up and fixed in space and time. For our experience. In fact, from the beginning of the Messianic preparation up till the parousia, passing through the historic manifestation of Jesus and the phases of growth of his church, a single event has been developing in the world, the incarnation, realized in each individual through the Eucharist. All the communions of a lifetime are one communion. All the communions of all men now living are one communion. All the communions of all men, present, past, and future, are one communion. Have we ever sufficiently considered the physical immensity of man and his extraordinary relations with the universe in order to realize in our minds the formidable implications of this elementary truth? Let us conjure up in our minds as best we can the vast multitudes of men in every epoch and in every land. According to the Catechism, we believe that this fearful anonymous throng is, by right, subject to the physical and overmastering contact of him whose appendage it is to be able omnia sibi subiscere, parentheses, by right, and to a certain extent in fact, for who can tell where the diffusion of Christ with the influence of grace stops as it spreads outward from the faithful at the heart of the human family? End parentheses. Yes, the human layer of the earth is wholly and continuously under the organizing influx of the incarnate Christ. This we all believe as one of the most certain points of our faith. Now, how does the human world itself appear within the structure of the universe? We have already spoken of this, parentheses pp 21 ff, end parentheses. And the more one thinks of it, the more one is struck by the obviousness and importance of the following conclusion. It appears as a zone of continuous spiritual transformation, where all inferior realities and forces without exception are sublimated into sensations, feelings, ideas, and the powers of knowledge and love. Around the earth, the center of our field of vision, the souls of men form in some manner the incandescent surface of matter plunged into God. From the dynamic and biological point of view, it is quite as impossible to draw a line below it as to draw a line between a plant and the environment that sustains it. If, then, the Eucharist is a sovereign influence upon our human natures, then its energy naturally extends, owing to the effects of continuity, into the less luminous regions that sustain us. Descendit ad inferos, one might say. At every moment, the Eucharistic Christ controls, from the point of view of the organization of the pleroma, parentheses, which is the only true point of view from which the world can be understood, end parentheses, the whole movement of the universe. The Christ per quem omnia Domine semper creas vivificas et praestas nobis. The control of which we are speaking is at the minimum a final refinement, a final purification, a final harnessing of all the elements which can be used in the construction of the new earth. But how can we avoid going further and believing that the sacramental action of Christ, precisely because it sanctifies matter, extends its influence beyond the pure supernatural over all that makes up the internal and external ambience of the faithful? That is to say, that it sets its mark in everything which we call, quote, our providence, end quote. Question mark, it's a question. Rewind it and see where the... If this is the case, then we find ourselves, parentheses, by simply having followed the, quote, extensions, end quote, of the Eucharist, and, parentheses, not quote. It's quotes, extensions is in quotes, but by simply up to Eucharist is in parentheses. Continuing. Plunged once again precisely into our divine milieu. He said the thing. It's the title of the book. Christ, for whom and in whom we are formed, each with his own individuality and his own vocation. Christ reveals himself in each reality around us and shines like an ultimate determinant, like a center, one might almost say like a universal element. As our humanity assimilates the material world, and as the host assimilates our humanity, the Eucharistic transformation goes beyond and completes the transubstantiation of the bread on the altar. Step by step, it irresistibly invades the universe. It is the fire that sweeps over the heath, the stroke that vibrates through the bronze, in a secondary and generalized sense, but in a true sense, the sacramental species are formed by the totality of the world, and the duration of the creation is the time needed for its consecration. In Christo vivimus, movemur et sumus. Grant, O God, that when I draw near to the altar to communicate, I may henceforth discern the infinite perspectives hidden beneath the smallest and the smallness and the nearness of the host in which you are concealed. I have already accustomed myself to seeing beneath the stillness of that piece of bread a devouring power which, in the words of the greatest doctors of your church, far from being consumed by me, consumes me. Give me the strength to rise above the remaining illusions which tend to make me think of your touch as circumscribed and momentary. I am beginning to understand. Under the sacramental species, it is primarily through the, quote, accidents, end quote, of matter that you touch me. But, as a consequence, it is also through the whole universe in proportion as this ebbs and flows over me under your primary influence. In a true sense, the arms and the heart which you open to me are nothing less than all the united powers of the world which, penetrated and permeated to their depths by your will, your tastes, and your temperament, converge upon my being to form it, nourish it, and bear it along towards the center of your fire. In the host, it is my life that you are offering me, O Jesus. What can I do to gather up and answer that universal and enveloping embrace? Quo modo comprehendam ut comprehensus sim? Question mark. To the total offer that is made me, I can only answer by a total acceptance. I shall therefore react to the Eucharistic contact with the entire effort of my life. Of my life of today and of my life of tomorrow, of my personal life and of my life as linked to all other lives. Periodically, the sacred species may perhaps fade away in me, but each time they will leave me a little more deeply engulfed in the layers of your omnipresence. Living and dying, I shall never at any moment cease to move forward in you. Thus, the precept implicit in your church that we must communicate everywhere and always is justified with extraordinary force and precision. The Eucharist must invade my life. My life must become, as a result of the sacrament, an unlimited and endless contact with you. That life which seemed a few moments ago like a baptism with you in the waters of the world now reveals itself to me as communion with you through the world. It is the sacrament of life, the sacrament of my life received, of my life lived, of my life surrendered. Because you ascended into heaven after having descended into hell, you have so filled the universe in every direction, Jesus, that henceforth it is blessedly impossible for us to escape you. Quo ibo a spiritu tuo et quo a faci, I don't know, tua fugiam. It's been said that my Latin is so vulgar it might as well be Italian. Anyway. Now I know that for certain, neither life whose advance increases your hold upon me, nor death which throws me into your hands, nor the good or evil spiritual powers which are your living instruments, nor the energies of matter into which you have plunged, nor the irreversible stream of duration whose rhythm and flow you control without appeal, nor the unfathomable abysses of space which are the measure of your greatness. Neque mors, neque vita, neque angeli, neque principatus, neque potestes, neque virtutes, neque instantia, neque futura, neque fortitudo, neque altitudo, neque profundum, neque ulla creatura, parentheses, Romans, I guess 3, Romans 8:38, I think, end parentheses. None of these things will be able to separate me from your substantial love, because they are only the veil. They are all only the veil. The, quote, species, end quote, parentheses, under which you take hold of me, in order that I may take hold of you. And it looks like the rest of the book is in those parentheses. Or either Teilhard de Chardin, or the translator, or perhaps both, forgot to put the end parentheses there. Let's assume that. It would be ridiculous to put the rest of the book in parentheses, wouldn't it? Once again, Lord, I ask, which is the most precious of these two beatitudes? That all things for me should be a contact with you? Or that you should be so, quote, universal, end quote, that I can undergo you and grasp you in every creature? Sometimes people think that they can increase your attraction in my eyes by stressing almost exclusively the charm and goodness of your human life in the past. But truly, O Lord, if I wanted to cherish only a man, then I would surely turn to those whom you have given me in the allurement of their present flowering. Are there not, with our mothers, brothers, friends, and sisters, enough irresistibly lovable people around us? Why should we turn to Judea 2,000 years ago? No, what I cry out for, like every living being, with my whole life and all my earthly passion, is something very different from an equal to cherish. It is a God to adore. To adore, that means to lose oneself in the unfathomable, to plunge into the inexhaustible, to find peace in the incorruptible, to be absorbed in defined immensity, to offer oneself to the fire and the transparency, to annihilate oneself in proportion as one becomes more deliberately conscious of oneself, and to give one's deepest, so that whose depth has no end, to that whose depth has no end. Whom then can we adore? The more man becomes man, the more will he become prey to a need that is always more explicit, more subtle, and more magnificent. The need to adore. I have two A-D-O-R-E, not to adore. Obviously. Disperse, O Jesus, the clouds with your lightning. Show yourself to us as the mighty, the radiant, the risen. Come to us once again as the Pantocrator who filled the solitude of the cupolas in the ancient basilicas. Nothing less than this parousia is needed to counterbalance and dominate in our hearts the glory of the world that is coming into view, and so that we should triumph over the world with you. Come to us clothed in the glory of the world. That's the end of the section. So that was section 2 of section 3, if I'm not mistaken. Like part 3 of the whole book, entitled The Divine Milieu. That was the end of part 2 of part 3, that is called The Nature of the Divine Milieu, the Universal Christ, and the Great Communion. So, I feel like, even though it'll make the episode a little short, I'm going to stop there rather than begin a whole new section and only read a page or two of the new section, if that makes sense. Cool. Yeah. I hope everybody's doing well. And for those of you who are still here, I would cordially invite you to subscribe to my new channel. It's called Indian Hollywoods. I'm watching and reacting to Indian movies. For those who don't know, I live here in India, have for 6 years, and will for the rest of my life is the plan. And so, I've seen a lot of Indian movies, but there's still, probably hundreds of thousands. I don't know if there's millions I haven't seen. There might be, but at least hundreds of thousands. Tens of thousands? I really don't know how many Indian movies there are, but there's a lot. Going back to the beginning of cinema, for sure, there's a lot. Of those, not all of them I can find with English subtitles. And So that narrows it down. But anyway, yeah. So did I already point? It's called Indian Hollywoods. So you can click there and follow that. It's brand new, so there's only one video up there as I'm talking to you right now. But the plan is to put up a second one sometime this weekend. Right now it's Friday. So that will be happening soon. Ooh, hands. And yeah, okay. I guess that's it. I always like look around at this point to see if there's anything physically around me to remind me of anything else I should say. I've mentioned it before, but there's a marked difference in since we're reading 5 books here right now on chicken philosophy. Secret of the Golden Flower, which is Taoist alchemy. The Divine Milieu, which is Teilhard de Chardin, who's the coolest Catholic I can find. The Meccan Revelation by Ibn al-Arabi, who's the coolest Muslim I can find. And the writings of Martin Luther, who maybe isn't the coolest Protestant I can find, but he's kind of the first one, so I figured he'd be a good person to read. And Carl Jung, who's the coolest Jungian I can find. Anyway, and then there's a completely different podcast. Chicken Philosophy is a podcast as well as a YouTube channel. But actually, it's kind of secondary to my main focus, which is Buddhist Books podcast. So you can check that out. That's where I put most of my, YouTubing energy. I'm just looking over because I'm in a tropical climate, and so there's like a mold or something that when we first shifted to Anjuna in 2021, I don't know, something about the place we were. It was near the ocean, but it was like in a particular zone, and all of my books, especially like the leather-bound books, were getting this mold, and I had to like wipe them off and clean them off. And now there's only one of my Tipitaka that it keeps. I just notice it every couple weeks. There it is again, and I have to wipe it down again. All the rest of them are fine. It's just that one. Volume 2 of the Collected Discourses of the Buddha. I don't know. I don't think there's anything to it being that book in particular that's getting moldy, but I'll keep in mind the possibility that maybe it's a sign from the suchness. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, what was I saying? I don't know what I was saying. I was leading towards something. Oh, yeah. And so I've mentioned before that recently Martin Luther's been talking about the sacrament of the Eucharist and the taking of the body and blood and so on. And his approach is obviously very different from Teilhard de Chardin's approach. So it's very interesting to get two completely, not opposite exactly, just on different planets. Because, Teilhard de Chardin is coming from a standpoint of like just pretending that Protestantism doesn't exist. But in the 1950s, I think, is when this was originally written, The Divine Milieu. He was writing from the 40s up through the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. And 57 was when this originally was published. So he's coming from the standpoint of, a priest of the, 2,000-year-old one true Church of Christ. Is his perspective. Whereas Martin Luther was speaking in like 1522, at least the part that we're reading right now, as the first person in the Catholic Church to openly reject many core aspects of the Catholic Church without getting his head cut off, but 500 years ago. So yeah, that's two very different places to be approaching the same topic from, and talking about different things in relation to it. But it's interesting to get a perspective. Whether you're coming from outside, from generally speaking, this whole Checan philosophy thing started with Carl Jung, so I'm generally speaking as kind of like a prophylactic or prophylactic? Anyway, as like a general, rubber glove, let's say, for the hand, let's say. Coming at all this from the standpoint of let's explore these concepts, ideas, and as Jung would say, fantasies, but he's not like saying fantasies like, oh, it's just in your head. It's in your head, which is important because there isn't anything in the human experience that's not in your head, so these are important things to look into and analyze, and especially the things that are, I don't know if especially is the right word, but in particular, the things that are shared among a vast number of people throughout decades and centuries and even millennia. They're important to investigate, to understand, and to allow them to go through the processes that they're going through in the present moment, to get in touch with processes they've been through in the past, and maybe even to allow them to go through processes within yourself that maybe they'll go through those processes for you before they go through those processes for everyone else. And this is regardless of whether or not you would consider yourself a member of whatever group, whether it be Chinese Taoist alchemy or Islam or whatever it is that we're discussing here on Checan philosophy. In this case, Catholicism. Do you know what I'm saying? Am I making any sense? Probably not, but it's okay. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, the divine milieu, the Catholic priest who had the vision of the noosphere, the internet, the cyber brain, which is the second coming of Christ, like 70 years ago, 80 years ago, he was having these ideas. So he's considered a bit of a prophet and a visionary by some. And anyway, hope you enjoy it, and I hope you come back next time for some more Teilhard de Chardin. And I think I've spoken long enough, and I think I've actually succeeded in making this episode a little longer than a half an hour, which was my goal. I wasn't sure if I was going to have anything to say, but it turns out I did. So I would invite you to smell this artificial